down.
They've adapted. Screw the monster problem, we've got bigger problems right now. Reaver's learned how to climb! First of all, we leave the EU, now I've got this shit to deal with. Grab your kids and hide your wife, otherwise you're gonna get fucked in the ass. It's actually kind of ironic, because believe it or not, wildlife is actually a lot less threatening. Don't get me wrong though, hostile wildlife in Evolve Stage 2 are still pretty dangerous and you have to be careful, but they're way less threatening than the old Evolve. For instance, although Reavers can now climb and still do damage to you, they no longer slow you with their attacks. Woo! Because for those of you that have played Evolve before, that was fucking annoying. But it doesn't stop there. All wildlife's health has been reduced by 50%. How can it get any better? And it actually plays out so much smoother because you don't have to worry about wildlife so much and you can concentrate more on the hunt. Then on the monster side of things, it is so much more enjoyable and genuinely is fantastic for new players as well because they don't have to learn a whole lot about the wildlife before they start playing. For example, fighting larger wildlife at stage 1 wasn't very wise because they would be hard to kill and would do a lot of damage in return. So most players would play it safer and smarter and wait until they've staged up. Well, now it's actually better to go for the larger wildlife because one, they give you more meat, and secondly, they're easier to kill than taking a sledgehammer to a duckling. In terms of the number of meats they now have 3 instead of 4, and then also mammoth birds now have 2 instead of 3, but those are the only meat changes that have been made. There is also a new spawning system in, so instead of the wildlife just spawning completely randomly, wildlife will spawn consistently in certain areas and also will spawn a lot more often, so as a monster you'll find it a lot easier to stage up. So in other words, you don't need a dedicated feeding route to try and stage up quicker, but it sure does help. Talking more specifically about a couple of the wildlife, trapjaws are now a lot less toxic. They were never really a problem for the hunters and they still really aren't. But for the monster, trapjaws used to stop you from eating and there was no point in trying to kill them because they took way too long to kill because they had so much health, and even if you did, each trapjaw only gave 1 meat. Well, now trapjaws are still a pest wildlife and try and stop you from eating, but the great news is they die so much easier, but the downside is you can't actually eat them. The other thing you'll find is the tyrant is actually nowhere to be seen in this build. They've apparently taken the tyrant out because they actually want to refactor how the tyrant actually behaves in the game. They actually haven't said whether they're making the tyrant more powerful or less powerful, but I think it'll probably go in a similar-ish direction to the other wildlife, but obviously it's going to behave in a different way. The next thing I want to quickly cover is the wildlife buffs. In other words, there is elite wildlife in the game which can be located by the little star symbol above them. Then if you kill any of these wildlife as monster or hunter, you'll get a temporary buff which will help you during the game. Well, all those buffs are still in the game and I can say they feel so much more balanced. One thing that is different is the way the buffs spawn. Basically, depending on the tier of the buff or how powerful the buff is, it will spawn at different times during the game. So a tier 1 buff, which is the lowest grade of tier, will spawn at 3 minutes and that can consist of things like Reavers and Megamouths. Then tier 2 buffs will spawn at 6 minutes and again that can be things like Venom Hounds and Marsh Striders. Finally, at 10 minutes the most powerful buffs will spawn, which are things like Armadons and Sloths. And I think that's a really smart idea, so monsters and hunters can't get too powerful really quickly. It'll be interesting to see if they keep the health buff for the tyrant when he returns to the game. The final thing I want to cover is the monster feeding on wildlife and being shot at. In the old build, if the monster was to eat and take damage, it would instantly stop the monster eating. This was an extremely frustrating mechanic, especially since hunters could just simply tap at the monster and it would instantly stop them trying to eat. Well, there is a new mechanic now where you actually have to do a certain amount of damage to the monster in order to stop them from eating. This also varies in the distance you are away from the monster and what hunter you are using. So if you want the monster to stop eating in front of you, you need to make sure you work as a team. All I can say after trying this and many other things in Evolve Stage 2, it plays out far more smoothly and is definitely far more player friendly. If you have any further questions, I'll leave some info in the description which will be able to direct you to get answers to those questions. Anyway guys, I hope this video helped you out. Leave a like if it did, and otherwise, I'll see you in the next one.